I never imagined I'd be humiliated like that, especially not by my own daughter. One minute, I was standing right beside her at the restaurant counter. Then suddenly, she turned to the cashier and said, "Don't talk to her. That old woman is just the maid." I froze. The world didn't end, but something inside me cracked open. My name is Eleanor Dawes. I'm 69. I used to run a little antiques booth, a flea market. I once taught my daughter how to make apple pie from scratch, crust and all. That day, I realized something painful. Somewhere along the way, I had let myself disappear. But they were wrong to count me out. Completely wrong. Let me tell you how I proved it. Not with drama or shouting, but in my own quiet, steady way. Have you ever been mistaken for someone smaller than who you really are, especially by the people you raised? If that's ever happened to you, I wonder what you would have done. It was one of those spring Saturdays in Portland that feels almost poetic, light spilling across the sidewalks, birds chirping so loudly it made people pause mid-sentence. We had gone out for brunch. It was supposed to be a little celebration because Lily had just finished her scholarship application. Rachel was the one who picked the place. It was sleek and minimal, with art on the walls that didn't really look like anything. At the counter, I leaned in to tell the cashier her earrings were lovely. Just a small kindness, something simple. But before she could even respond, Rachel cut in. She said, "Don't talk to her. That old woman is just the maid." The cashier blinked, then turned to look at me. I could see she didn't know whether to apologize or just pretend it didn't happen. I stepped back, swallowed hard. Rachel didn't even glance at me. Lily stood there too, her eyes locked on the floor. We ate outside on the patio. Rachel ordered lavender pancakes and a kale omelet. She talked about Lily's internship like it was already guaranteed. I tried to eat, but the toast just felt dry in my mouth. The flavor never came. Rachel paid the bill, tipped generously, smiled like she thought everything had gone perfectly. I excused myself to the restroom. Inside, the space was cool and polished. Gold fixtures, boutique soap, and a mirror that showed me more than I wanted to see. Under the harsh lights, I looked at the woman staring back. She looked like someone who didn't speak up anymore, like someone who had become invisible, even in her own story. I whispered to her, "You are not invisible." It wasn't a promise, not yet, just a breath, soft and fragile, something I could hold on to before it disappeared again. If any part of this story reached you, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside by the people who should have known better, I'd really like to hear from you. You don't have to share everything. Just tell me this. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? Or maybe, did you ever find strength in that silence? I read every message. They remind me I'm not alone. And if this feels familiar to you, even just a little, I hope you'll stay with me. You can subscribe if you'd like to hear the rest, because next time I open that box, and what I find inside changes everything. The drive home was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that soothes you. It was the kind that hums behind your ears, the kind that makes you wonder if silence has a voice of its own. I kept seeing Rachel's face in my mind, so sure of herself, so practiced, like she believed the version of me she made up more than she ever believed in who I actually am. When I got home, I didn't bother with the overhead light. I just turned on the little floor lamp in the corner, the one that gave off that soft yellow glow. The kids used to say it looked like fireflies lived inside the shade. A breeze came through the cracked window, and I could smell the lilacs from the neighbor's yard. I stood there in the middle of the living room and took a deep, steady breath. Some daughters inherit their mother's kindness or grace. Mine, she perfected the art of forgetting me. I reached up and pulled down the wooden box from the top of the closet, the kind that used to hold family photos. Now it was dusty and heavy with the kind of memory that seeps into old wood. Inside, everything was still there, just as I had left it. A metal key, a thick envelope marked Deed 2002, and a smaller one labeled Bank, Oregon Trust. I held the key in my hand. My fingers didn't shake, even though part of me thought they would. I remembered sitting across from that banker years ago. It was right after George passed. Rachel and I were barely speaking, even back then. The banker had on a blue tie and never quite looked me in the eye, but he listened. I had told him clear as day that I wanted the family plot in my name only, no one else's, not yet. I remember saying, there may come a time when they forget how we got here. And here we were. I walked over to the bookshelf and pushed aside a row of gardening books. Tucked behind them, hidden in plain sight, was the little safe. My hands knew that dial like a melody. Inside, nothing had moved. My will, last updated in 2019, my marriage certificate, a faded photo of me holding Rachel when she was 5. I ran my thumb across the edge of the paper, then closed it all back up. It wasn't relief I felt, no, not quite. It was something steadier, like standing on both feet after drifting too long. I picked up an old notebook from the coffee table, my journal, and for the first time in 7 years, I took off the cap of a pen. The words came slowly at first, then smoother, then sharper than I expected. I wrote about the restaurant, about how Rachel wouldn't even look at me when she said what she said, about Lily's eyes flicking around like she was watching a fire she wasn't supposed to see. Before I closed the book, I wrote something I hadn't said out loud until now. I still remember who I was before she rewrote me. Then I called the number on the envelope marked Deed. A receptionist answered. I gave her my name and asked if I could see Mr. Levine. She remembered me, told me he still took the occasional appointment for longtime clients. Thursday, 10 a.m. Later that night, as I walked toward the bedroom, I saw something near the door, a small folded note on the floor. It said, "Grandma, I know what she said. I'm sorry. Love, Lily." My hand rested on the doorknob longer than it needed to. Lily's note stayed under my pillow all night. It felt like a thread I wasn't quite ready to let go of. It reminded me that someone still saw me for who I really was, not just the shadow Rachel kept trying to paint over me. I woke up with this strange sense of steadiness, not loud, not dramatic, just something quiet, humming beneath my ribs. That morning, I pulled out a soft blue blouse from the back of my closet, the one with delicate embroidery around the collar. I had stitched it myself, back when I used to trade linens for jars of jam at the market. I took my time pressing it, then pinned on my little silver brooch, one of the few things Rachel never called tacky. Downtown Portland looked just about the same. Same brick sidewalks, same maple trees, same mix of espresso and city buses in the air. The cafe had gotten a little trendier, vegan scones, rimless glasses, but underneath, it was still the same place. I spotted Tom right away. He was sitting beneath a string of lights that hadn't been there back in our market days, but his posture was exactly how I remembered it. Relaxed, steady, like someone who knew how to build something with care or take it apart without breaking anything. "Eleanor," he said, standing halfway to greet me. His hug was warm, just long enough. We sat down with 2 mugs between us and the comfort of not needing to rush. "I almost didn't call you," I said. He gave a small smile. "You always call when you're about to stir something. You've got steel under all that lace. You just forget sometimes." We talked about old friends. Janice from the jam stand had passed away last winter. Dwayne had moved down to Arizona. I told him about my knees, and he told me about a new shoulder. The conversation had its quiet sorrows, but it was gentle, familiar. Eventually, I told him about the restaurant. Not everything, just enough. About the waiter, about Rachel's voice. I kept it light, but the weight of it was still there. He leaned back for a while, watching the steam rise from his mug. "That wasn't about you," he said softly. "That was about her being afraid of you becoming visible again." His words hit something in me, not with force, but like a nail being driven in slowly and right on target. I looked at him and said, "I don't know what comes next, but I know I'm not done yet." He nodded. "If you ever need a witness," he said, "I'm still pretty good at showing up." We didn't hug again when we left. He just looked me in the eyes and gave me that little carpenter's nod of his, like something had been measured and found level. When I got home, the mailbox was stuffed full of glossy brochures. Names like Cedar Pines, Golden Hearth, and Sunset Arms, all written in those soft cursive fonts, smiling women with silver hair posing with puzzle pieces and pudding cups. On the back of one, I recognized Rachel's handwriting. "Just thought you might want options." I stood in the doorway, flipping through page after page of beige carpeting and bingo schedules. Then, without anger, just quiet certainty, I tore the last brochure in two, dropped the pieces into the recycling bin. I wasn't ready to be filed away. The torn brochure was still there in the kitchen trash, half covered by orange peels and coffee grounds. I've never been one to throw something away unless I meant it. That's how I knew this time was different. I wasn't just saying no to Rachel's suggestion. I was making a choice not to disappear. Sunday came, and with it, the usual performance of everything looking normal. Rachel's email had said it would be just a casual dinner. In her world, that meant linen napkins and a playlist she had approved ahead of time. I put on a dark green cardigan and my black flats. Safe, presentable, easy to overlook. Their house in the suburbs looked like something pulled straight from a home magazine. Everything was polished, but trying hard to look rustic. The smell of rosemary lamb hit me even before the door opened. It was like perfection had a scent, and Rachel had found a way to pump it through the air vents. She opened the door and said hi, her eyes barely meeting mine. Then she added, "You can help with the wine glasses." There were already guests inside. David's boss, his wife, Lily sitting by the window, quiet. David gave me a half smile and a quick hug. He always had the decency to look uncomfortable. Dinner was already plated. Rachel went around the room introducing everyone. She threw in a few jokes, polished just enough. When she got to me, her smile turned just a little too bright. She said, "And this is my mother. She's been staying with us, helping around the house." It was like I wasn't really there. I glanced down at the lamb on my plate, then looked at my hands. One of the guests leaned in politely and asked, "Do you work with the family?" David cleared his throat and said, "She's Rachel's mother." The man quickly nodded and looked sorry. I gave him a small smile to make it easier. Over the years, I'd gotten good at carrying other people's discomfort. The conversation moved on without me. They talked about the stock market, summer plans, someone's new Tesla. Rachel laughed right on cue. Lily barely touched her food. After dessert, I got up to start clearing the plates. No one asked me to. It just felt easier than sitting there pretending I belonged. As I passed through the kitchen, Lily gently tugged at my sleeve. She whispered, "You shouldn't have to be here like this." I touched her cheek and told her, "It's just a dinner, sweetheart." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. As I reached for the sink, a dish slipped from my hand. It didn't break, just hit the counter with a dull sound that turned all the heads in the room. I turned around and saw Rachel's expression tighten, then shift into that smooth, practiced smile. She said, "Mom, if you keep dropping things, I might actually have to hire someone." Her laugh was sharp. The guests chuckled politely. David's wife took another sip of wine. Lily stared at the floor. I picked up the dish and washed it slowly, by hand. That night, once I was back in my room, I opened my laptop to check the weather. A small notification popped up in the corner. Reminder, your quarterly trust account summary is now available. I hadn't touched that account since George set it up. Rachel didn't even know it existed. I just sat there, staring at the screen. Sometimes they give you a seat at the table so they can say they included you, but a place, that's something you have to claim for yourself. That email wasn't junk. It was a door I didn't even realize I still had the key to. The morning after dinner at Rachel's, I woke up early, earlier than usual, even before the cat. The light was coming in soft through the lace curtains, casting little patterns across the desk. I could still smell the citrus cleaner I'd used the night before. Juniper stretched once at the corner of the desk, then curled back into sleep, her tail flicking just a little. I clicked the link in the email and logged in. 2-factor authentication, a few security questions. My fingers trembled slightly. I hadn't felt that in a long time. The screen flickered, then loaded. Available balance? Enough. Actually, more than enough. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. I'm not a rich woman, not by any means, but I've always planned ahead. I saved. I chose the long road, even when it was slow. Rachel used to joke that I couponed like it was a competitive sport. She never asked where all of that saving went. I called the bank and waited through the usual hold music. When the clerk picked up, she sounded cheerful, efficient. I verified my information and asked to update my contact details. I took Rachel's email off the file. Then I asked to remove her name altogether. I also asked if I could change the beneficiary. "Yes, ma'am," the clerk said. "You're the primary account holder. You have full discretion." After I hung up, I opened the drawer on the left side of my desk. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside was an old file folder. The deed papers for a piece of land up near Olympia, Washington. It's about 5 acres, mostly wild. We bought it when George retired. I still remember the trees leaning in over the gravel path, and George saying, "Even if we never build a thing, land remembers who planted roots on it." He'd made me promise to keep it in my name. I'd forgotten that part, or maybe I'd pushed it aside just to get through everything. One day, he'd told me, "You may need this." I called the number on the property folder. It still worked. There was a new receptionist, and the management company had changed, but the lot was still there, still in my name, still untouched. I scheduled a visit for next week. Then I opened a new legal pad and started a list. How to use the land, whether to sell, maybe donate. A quiet smile crept in as I wrote. I've always loved planning, especially when no one noticed. That's when it meant the most. At noon, I called Tom, just to say hi. He didn't ask questions or try to dig, but when I mentioned Washington, he said, "You always had more in your pocket than people thought." Later that day, I went back into the trust account and changed the beneficiary. It only took a few clicks. But before it processed, the screen paused and asked, "Are you sure?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. I've never needed to be loud, but I've always known how to prepare. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with Juniper curled at my feet. There was no big moment, no fireworks, just quiet, thoughtful steps. That night, as I was getting into bed, the phone buzzed. One new voicemail. "Mom, we need to talk. I found something in your mail." Rachel's voice was tight, controlled. I could almost picture her gripping the phone too hard. I deleted the message. If she really wants to talk, she'll have to start with the truth. There are really just 2 kinds of letters in this life, the ones you send and the ones you never meant to. Rain tapped softly on my bedroom window, like a rhythm I hadn't heard in years, but somehow still remembered. The room was dim, quiet, except for the flicker of a vanilla candle beside the bed. I hadn't lit that candle in so long, but today felt like the right time. I sat on the edge of my bed with a stack of stationery I used to save for thank you notes and Christmas cards. Today, it felt more like a witness stand. I picked the heavier paper, the kind that doesn't let your words bleed through. The first letter was for Lily. I wrote down the things I'd never found the moment to say out loud. That family can leave bruises without ever raising a hand. That sometimes the deepest pain wears a smile and sits quietly across the table. But I also told her I saw something in her that was still whole, a kind of warmth that hadn't yet hardened into pretending. Something that reminded me of the girl I used to be before I learned that silence can feel like safety. I ended the letter with a sentence I wish someone had once said to me. "You don't owe anyone your joy, Lily, not even your mother." I sealed it and wrote on the front, "For later." I didn't know when she'd read it, maybe never, but it was there now, waiting. The second letter took longer. It began with just her name, Rachel. I didn't dress up the words. I let them stay plain, honest. I wrote about the restaurant, about those brochures, about the night she introduced me to strangers as someone who helps around the house. I wrote about the birthdays that came and went with no card, the silence on holidays, the way she used kindness like a currency, only to toss it aside when it no longer served her. At the end, I wrote one line, "I see you now. Not the version you want me to see. All of you." I didn't seal that one. It wasn't ready for her eyes. Not yet. I placed Lily's letter in the drawer of my nightstand. Then I picked up the phone and left her a message. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Grandma. I just wanted to say thank you for the other night. You didn't have to say anything, but you did, and I saw you. I hope school's going well. Maybe we can go for a walk sometime, if you'd like. No pressure. Just thank you." I had just set the phone down when it lit up again. Rachel. I didn't answer. I waited. Her voicemail started before the last ring had even finished. "Mom, what exactly are you doing? Lily is confused, and honestly, so am I. You're creating tension that didn't exist, acting like some kind of victim. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but if this keeps up, I may have to rethink how much time Lily spends around you. Let's not escalate things." My hand stayed steady. For once, it didn't shake. I folded the second letter, placed it in a new envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my old writing desk, right next to a folder I hadn't touched in years, but never once forgot. The tab on it read, "Final version, Will." Some truths don't need to be argued. They just need to be written down, clear, undeniable, and one day they'll read it. Turns out, the silence they counted on wasn't agreement. It was restraint. That morning air had the kind of early summer crispness that makes you reach for a shawl, even while sunlight warms your arms. The botanical garden was already buzzing, not with bees, but with soft laughter, heels tapping against cobblestones, and the quiet clink of mimosa glasses. Light jazz floated through the air like steam from a teacup. It was the kind of place where everything looked curated, even the people. Rachel had invited me, but I knew it wasn't really for me. Her words were polite enough. It would mean a lot if you came, but I understood what she was saying underneath. This was for show. She wanted the guests to see the full picture, something polished, a supportive mother, a graceful daughter, a family standing together for a cause. I found a seat at a small table tucked beneath a magnolia tree. I wore a pale blue cardigan I hadn't touched in years. Simple, soft, the kind of armor that doesn't look like armor. Then I heard someone call my name. "Eleanor?" That voice pulled me upright. It was Carol, her eyes still bright, her white curls bouncing a little as she walked toward me. She used to run the public library where I taught weekend craft classes for kids. That must have been over 20 years ago. She smiled big and said, "You haven't aged a day. I still tell people you were the heart of that old community center, back before they tore it down." She led me over to her table without hesitation and introduced me like I mattered. To each guest, she said, "This is Eleanor, brilliant with logistics, best grant writer I ever worked with." From across the garden, I saw Rachel watching. Her face shifted, her lips pressed into a thin line. A few minutes later, she stepped up onto the stage and took the microphone. Her voice softened as she spoke about the garden expansion, about family and community support. "I want to thank those closest to me," she said, "for always believing in my vision." No names, just suggestion. When the applause faded, I stood, not in a rush, just enough for the hem of my linen dress to settle at full length. I stepped forward, waited for the room to settle. And I said, "I'm grateful that the land from my trust helped make this space possible. I've always believed green places should belong to children and the community, not just the city." There was a moment of silence. Then people started clapping again, louder this time, longer. Some turned and looked at me, not at Rachel. Carol gave me a smile from behind her glass. And across the patio, Lily met my eyes. She didn't smile, not quite, but her chin lifted. She saw me. As the crowd started drifting toward desserts and photo booths, I walked slowly toward the parking lot. Rachel caught up with me halfway down the path. Her voice was tight. "What do you think you're doing?" I adjusted my bag, looked her in the eye, and said it clearly. "Starting over." Sometimes, when a door stays closed too long, you just stop knocking. You look for a window instead. The library smelled like cedar shelves and old storybook glue. It was warm in a way that felt familiar, the kind of place where time quiets down. I could hear kids laughing near the back, their voices chasing each other around the reading circle. I hadn't been to that branch in years, but my feet seemed to remember the way. I didn't go there expecting to see her, not really, but there she was, Lily, sitting near the young adult section, knees tucked in, hair hidden under a soft beanie, one hand resting on the spine of a book. She hadn't noticed me yet. I walked slowly, not pushing, letting her decide what to do. When she looked up, her face didn't close off, it opened. "Grandma," she said, in that same gentle voice she used that night in Rachel's kitchen, but this time there was sunlight instead of shadows. I had a return, I told her, holding up the book, and maybe a hunch. She smiled. "Was it Stargirl? You gave me that when I was 9. I glanced at the cover, same edition, worn corners, still one of the better things I've passed down. We stood there in that little aisle like it belonged to us. I didn't bring up Rachel. I didn't ask anything heavy. We just talked. About books, old neighbors, the cat I used to have, the ceramic studio I once ran. Small bridges, nothing sharp. Before we left, I reached into my tote and handed her a small wrapped box. She blinked, a little surprised, and opened it carefully. Her hands looked older than I remembered. Inside was a pair of pearl drop earrings. Simple, elegant, not worth much in dollars. "These were mine when I still believed in promises," I said. "I'd like you to have them anyway." She swallowed hard, but didn't speak right away. We sat on the bench just outside the doors. A soft drizzle blurred the view of the street. I watched a little girl inside press her hands to the window and draw shapes in the fogged-up glass. "I don't want to make things worse," Lily said softly. "I know," I answered. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens, I'm here. If you ever need to talk, or sit in silence, or just get away for a while, you've got a place." Lily looked right at me then, really looked, and she hugged me. Not a light hug, a full one, arms wrapped tight around my back like she was holding on to something before it slipped away. "I'm trying, Grandma," she whispered. "I just don't know how to fix it all." "You don't have to fix everything," I said, resting my cheek against her hair. "You just have to remember who you are." When we pulled apart, I kissed her cheek and let her walk ahead. I stayed behind for a moment, pretending to check the sky. And that's when I saw it, across the street, parked between 2 cars, Rachel's dark blue SUV, empty, the windows fogged up slightly, no sign of movement, but the timing, it didn't sit right with me. I turned and walked away. The earrings were gone. The box felt lighter now, but my steps somehow felt heavier. If you've ever had that moment when the people closest to you stopped seeing who you really are, maybe you understand a little of what I'm carrying. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever chosen silence because it felt safer than saying the truth out loud? Leave me a comment. I read every single one, and they help more than you probably know. And if this story feels familiar, if something in it is beginning to echo in your own life, make sure to subscribe, because something is shifting now. And next time, Well, some things just don't stay hidden forever. I built a life inside walls I never thought I'd question, but the deed, it had always been mine. The law office wasn't really my style. Too modern, glass walls, sharp lighting, and some abstract sculpture on the side table that looked like bent metal. But the woman behind the desk, dressed in a navy suit, had kind eyes. She greeted me like I actually mattered. "Mrs. Harper," she said, handing me a pen and a folder. "Everything's ready." I opened it slowly. Inside were the transfer documents, the updated will, the trust paperwork, all the things we'd discussed, all the years I spent letting Rachel talk over me, assume things, take what wasn't hers. This little stack of paper made things clear. I didn't do it to take something away from her. I did it to give something back to myself. The house was now fully placed in a private trust under my name only. No shared access, no more assumptions that after I'm gone meant anything but legal fiction. I had also revised the will. Rachel was no longer named, not to punish her, but because she'd made it clear she didn't see me as a person anymore, just an obstacle. I added a clause for Lily instead, based on age, conditional, but filled with hope. When I signed the last page, the attorney passed it to her assistant and gave me a quiet nod. "You're all set, and if your family pushes back, just give me a call." I stood up and said, "I don't expect civility, but I do expect silence, now that everything's clear." She smiled, not with pity, but with understanding. On the way home, it started to drizzle, that Oregon kind of rain that hardly makes a sound but still manages to soak your collar. I didn't mind. I left the windows cracked open and let the breeze run through the car, let it cool the pulse in my neck. My phone rang just as I pulled into the driveway. Rachel. "Hi, Mom," she chirped, way too cheerful. "I've been thinking about redoing the kitchen. Just little things, maybe a new backsplash, add an island. David thinks it could really open up the space." I sat there in the car, engine off, hand still on the keys. "You'll need permission," I said. She paused. "I'm sorry?" "For the renovations. The house isn't yours, Rachel." Her voice went flat. "What did you just say?" "It never was." And I let the silence hang in the air. I didn't explain. I didn't soften anything. The deed had always been in my name. Now it was protected. No more expectations. No more entitlement. Nothing left for her to assume. She hung up without saying another word. When I got inside, the cat greeted me with a slow thump of her tail. I slipped into my warmest cardigan and put the kettle on. Calm doesn't mean you feel nothing. It just means you've learned how to stand in the middle of it all without being pulled under. Later that evening, someone knocked on the door. The mailman, running late, handed me a certified envelope. I signed. He left without a word. I knew the return address the moment I saw it. A firm in Lake Oswego, Rachel's lawyer. I placed the envelope on the counter and didn't open it. Not because I was scared. I already knew what it would say. The words might be dressed up in legalese, but the message would be simple. You can't do this. But I could, and I had. Sometimes the only voice that gets heard in families like mine is the one written in legal terms. The letter came on thick, cream-colored paper, tucked inside an envelope that had clearly passed through too many hands before reaching me. I opened it with the letter opener Tom gave me years ago, brass with a little bird carved into the handle. He once told me it was meant for good words only. I suppose this counted in its own way. Rachel's lawyer had chosen every word carefully. It wasn't an outright threat, just a tidy list of polite phrases. Talk of property confusion, concern for well-being, future guardianship planning. Wrapped so neatly in professionalism, it almost sounded kind. But I knew better. I read it twice. Then once more, slower. I didn't feel afraid. Not even angry. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from watching your own child forget how to be decent. The dining table was already covered in documents. I'd laid them out that morning. Something in me just knew something was coming. The will, the trust, the updated property title, all signed, notarized, filed. My lawyer had seen to every last detail. I called him and put the phone on speaker. The teacup beside it was still warm. "Eleanor," he said calmly, "they have nothing. You've taken all the right steps. This is just noise." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I didn't think she'd go this far. "She's testing you," he said, softer now. "But paper doesn't lie. You're protected." When the call ended, I gathered every page and placed them in a fireproof lockbox I'd bought from the hardware store last winter. The folders were already labeled: property, trust, will, final. Years of habit, of writing things down, keeping records, just in case, had brought me to this moment more prepared than I realized. Then there was a knock at the front door, light, friendly. It was Carol. "I was going to bring a pie," she said over the phone when I answered, "but I figured you probably already had too much on your plate." I smiled. "You're not wrong, but I'm okay, truly." She didn't push, just said, "Well, if you want backup, I've got half a book club willing to testify you're sharper than half the city council." That made me laugh. She always knew how to cut through the clouds. Later, I checked my phone. There was a voicemail from Rachel. No greeting, just that clipped tone of hers. "I don't know what you think you're proving, but this is cruel, Mom. You're tearing the family apart." I listened once, then deleted it. Instead, I recorded something of my own. "Rachel, I won't argue anymore. I won't explain choices that protect my dignity. Let the papers speak for me." Not long after, I heard the chime of a group message. Rachel had texted the extended family. She didn't mention me by name, but the tone was clear. Words like paranoid, unstable, accused me of turning legal against my own daughter. But then something happened that she didn't expect. Joan replied first, then Alan from Minnesota. The messages were quiet, careful. "Are you okay, Eleanor? Want to talk?" I answered simply, "Thank you. I'm all right." And I meant it. For the first time in a long while, I really was. Just before dusk, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find Lily. Her hair was damp from the mist, a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She looked like someone who had just made a very grown-up choice. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Can I stay a while?" Lily didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. She stepped inside, Rain on her shoulders, holding that little duffel bag like it carried more than just clothes. I handed her a towel, and she dried her face without looking up. We moved into the living room. Juniper was already curled up in the corner of the couch. The fireplace crackled with a kind of quiet patience I wish I had learned earlier in life. I tucked a blanket around Lily's knees. She didn't pull away. Rain kept tapping at the windows. No thunder, just that steady sound, like someone gently insisting they be heard. After a while, Lily spoke. "I heard Mom on the phone last night," she said. Her voice was tight but steady. "She called you a burden, said this whole thing was turning into a circus. It made me feel sick." I didn't say anything right away. I'd heard worse over the years, but never from Lily. That was what made it different. She lowered her eyes and whispered, I don't want to be like her. Can I stay here for a few days?" I nodded. "Of course. The guest room's clean. You remember where the light switch is." She gave me a small smile, still in the hallway under the painting of the boat. We sat there a while, drinking the tea she'd made, letting the quiet fill in the spaces between us. I told her about how I used to roller skate down Fremont Street when I was her age, and about the time I burned a whole tray of cookies and tried to blame the cat. We laughed. Not loud, just enough. She told me she used to hide her report cards under the mattress when the grades weren't perfect. I already knew, but I let her think it was news. Then she noticed the envelope. It had been sitting on the edge of the mantel for days. Cream-colored, sealed, labeled simply, "For Lily." Her hand hovered above it. "Can I read it?" she asked. I nodded. She opened it slowly, unfolding the letter like it might fall apart from being understood. She didn't read it out loud, just scanned it quietly, line by line. Her face didn't shift much, but her shoulders did. They dropped, just a little. When she looked up, there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. That clarity people find when they realize they don't have to carry someone else's pain, that they can choose another way. "I want to be better than her," she said softly. "I think you're the strongest woman I know." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because some moments ask for stillness more than tears. We stayed like that for a while, each in our own chair, but the warmth between us stretched like a thread, holding the space. Eventually, she yawned. I led her to the guest room, flicking on the light in the hallway. It was still right there, under the painting she remembered. After the door closed, I stayed in the living room for a bit longer. And I thought, this is enough. Even if nothing else happens, this moment, this truth between us, is enough. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. I looked down at the screen. A notification from the bank. Rachel had just tried to access the trust account. I stared at it, calm but cold. Some people inherit bitterness, others pass it along, but not tonight, not in this house. If you've ever had to choose peace over being right, just to hold on to your dignity, then you probably understand more of me than most people do. Tell me, has there ever been a moment in your life when you realized that love needed boundaries? I'd really love to hear about it. And if you're still here, still listening, go ahead and subscribe. I've come a long way, but I'm not done yet, because next time, let's just say not all quiet women stay quiet forever. I didn't write that letter all at once. It came together like most things in my life, slowly, carefully, and honestly. No bitterness, just clarity. That morning, I wrapped the burgundy scarf around my neck, the one I used to wear on spring walks when the air was still cool. The sun was already warming the sidewalk when I stepped into the post office. The line was quiet, you could hear printers humming and envelopes sliding into bins. I handed the clerk a manila envelope, certified with return receipt. She asked if I wanted to add insurance. I said no, everything in there already survived. Inside were copies of the trust paperwork, the updated will, and one single page, my letter to Rachel. It wasn't a rant, it wasn't a plea, it was just the truth. You made me invisible. I simply stepped out of your shadow. I didn't wait to feel proud. Pride didn't get me here. What brought me here was knowing what felt right and doing it anyway. Back at home, Lily was zipping up her duffel bag. She was heading down to Eugene to visit a college. I made tea for both of us. Earl Grey for her, chamomile for me. We sat at the kitchen table, quiet, the kind of silence that feels like company, not distance. She looked up from her mug and asked, "You okay?" I nodded, "Better than I've been in years." She smiled and said, "I'm proud of you." And there was no performance in her voice, no echo of her mother, just Lily with that soft, honest heart of hers. After she left, Carol dropped by. She brought a bag of oranges and a lemon pie she swore wasn't from Safeway, but I spotted the plastic container at the bottom of the bag. We sat on the porch while the trees stretched into bloom. The street was still. Somewhere, a wind chime rang off-key, and it made us laugh. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Carol has a way of filling space without crowding it. Later that afternoon, while I was folding a dish towel, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Lily. She'd sent it from the train. "You were right to walk away. I love you. I see you." I stood there for a moment, just staring at the words, letting them settle, not in my head, in my chest, in that quiet place where things take root. I placed the phone face down on the table and took a slow breath. "That's all I needed," I whispered. And I meant it. Because sometimes closure doesn't come with an apology. Sometimes it shows up when you choose peace over permission, when you stop waiting to be heard and instead let your voice grow. Rachel would get that envelope soon. I wasn't waiting for a reply. That was never the point. The receipt wasn't in her hands. It was in mine. When Lily texted me, "I love you, I see you," something inside me finally settled. Not out of victory, out of relief. I hadn't fought to win. I'd just stopped disappearing. In this life, it's not always about proving yourself to the ones who refuse to look. Sometimes it's about planting a truth so steady, so quiet, that it outlives the noise. We don't have to carry the hurt we were handed. We can leave something different behind. A legacy made of boundaries and grace and love that doesn't need to beg for a place at the table. If any part of this story feels familiar to you, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Maybe someone else out there needs to know they're not the only one. And if you'd like to keep walking with me, go ahead and follow this journey. Next time, I'll tell you about the day my son took everything I had, my house, my savings, and left nothing but a cruel little note. It said, "Old loser, you stink." But the story, it's not nearly as simple as that.